Let's see. Um, Welcome back to Psynautical, podcast where we explore health and healing and the ideas that help us live healthier, more meaningful lives. I'm your host, Jared Helt. Today I'm joined by Dr. Sarah Nasir, a board certified physician in family medicine and addiction medicine who takes a whole person approach to healing. We'll be we'll be discussing addiction, trauma, nervous system, holistic recovery, what it truly means to heal beyond the symptoms. Dr. Sarah Nasir, welcome to Psynautical. It's great to have you on the show.
Jared, thank you so much for having me on your show, and a big warm hello to your audience as well.
Appreciate it. So, what inspired you originally to become a doctor or physician?
That's a very common question, right? I would say it was my mom. My mom is a doctor, and she used to practice when we were living abroad. And the way they practice medicine there is a little different from here. Over there, there's a lot more intimacy. And so she would take me when she had night shifts. I would spend the night with her in the hospital. I would see what was happening, what the nurses and the other doctors were doing. So I just had that exposure to the way the healthcare staff and the patients reacted with each other in such an intimate way. As well as in her private clinic, I remember this one time when she brought up a patient into, like, we lived on the upstairs of the clinic that was like two stories down. And she took the time to like counsel her. I was studying, but I was like keeping an ear open in the back. That moment just really, really touched me. I originally wanted to be an astronaut, but when I saw my mom have that moment, and one other moment that's like a core incident that led me into this position is we were making a family trip to India, and this was a new country for us. We've never been there before. But as soon as, like, when we were stepping out of the airport, and there's, people who are waiting there to help newcomers or people arriving in the airport to help them transfer some of their luggages and hopefully get a little money from it. That's one of the ways that people earn money there. And they came to help my mom. And when they found out that she's a doctor, the guy showed her such an immense respect that my mom was saying, like, there's no other profession like that of a doctor that earns you that respect and well wishes from people. So I think that's when my heart was attached to this noble profession.
Oh, nice. Incredible. Was there a defining moment that led you into addiction medicine?
I wouldn't say there was a defining moment. I feel like it was more of a journey. I was exposed to addiction in many parts during my medical school and training. One of them was during my third year of medical school when I was in doing OB rotation in rural West Virginia. And there was a lot of methamphetamine and other substance use disorder in this very underserved Appalachian population. Um, like, my first clear memory is that I was holding a newborn baby who was going through what's called neonatal abstinence syndrome. So basically, the baby was withdrawing from opioids because it was exposed as the mom was using the opioids. So it's like going cold turkey. Now, all of a sudden, cut off from mom. And at that time, we were saying, like, you can't breastfeed if you have, substances in the baby's stool or in the mom's urine. So that was a very tough and rough way of handling things. I saw that the nursery nurses, obviously, they loved the baby, and it was heartbreaking to see such an uncomfortable, fussy baby going through something it didn't ask for. And so we were having kind of like a hate fest, for lack of better words, against the mom, saying things like, how could the mom be so bad that she couldn't stop using for even just a little bit of time to give this new life a chance? So that's where it started. And then through residency, apparently we were sitting in a belt, the heroin belt that went from Mexico all the way up to Canada, and our my residency program in New York was exactly there. And we also had on top of it another opioid inducing epidemic where this is when the pendulum is swinging from doctors openly prescribing, being encouraged to prescribe opioids to control pain as the fifth vital sign, to now being like, okay, you got to cut it off because we have something called opioid epidemic. So apparently we had some doctors in town who were like pill mills, and they were prescribing opioids for a long period of time. And now DEA was, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Clamming down on it. And so the pendulum was swinging the other way. And then, of course, the other incident that was very crucial for me was having a mentor who switched the way that I looked at addiction. I was coming and entering this from all these, judgments and stigma against people who use. And when I came to present a patient to him, and I said, like, why can't this young man just hold his stuff together for just a little bit so we can get him on the medicine so his poor dad doesn't look like he's aging every week he comes in? What is wrong with this person? Why doesn't he love his family enough to quit? And then my attending told me that, Sarah, you do realize that addiction changes the brain. It's not just a choice anymore after a certain time. Whatever got them started on it, after they sustain it for a long enough time, their body actually changes and it starts to look like a chronic disease like diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, you name it. So that moment, I think that epiphany made me feel like so ashamed. And I think all the shame and the guilt came rushing down. And then as I stepped into working as an independent physician, the path opened up for me.
Oh, nice, nice. Kind of touching on that, but how has your perspective on addiction changed over time or over the years?
Yeah. I think definitely one of humility as well as one of inspiration and appreciation would be the other one. Because as I got to see more of what goes into climbing out of the pits of addiction, it's a lot of hard work. The person who decides to do it, they're not only struggling to climb out of it against their whole life, the trauma, the internal conflict, external um, load and they're bearing. But now here's their body that is going against them. And then when they enter the system, I have to admit the stigma against addiction is still very prevalent in our medical community and all the support systems as well. When we have patients coming in, they want some medicine. They may go to 12-step programs or recovery support systems. And then, even then, they're told, like, you can't be on these medicines if you really want to be clean. You don't want to substitute one drug for another drug. And so, being able to sit down with them and guide them through those external stigma as well as internal stigma, I believe this is how my work has evolved, where I'm trying to meet the person, not just the disease.
See, I see. What's one thing or lesson that you kind of learned from your patients that you'll never forget?
I think one of the biggest lessons that I have carried through, I think this journey, walking with my patients, working with my patients, has helped me understand the power of purpose. Because I feel the patients who are able to climb through and succeed are those who have some sort of powerful goal, something that means the world, the life to them, and they can shift their focus from their pain of the withdrawal symptoms in the body, their body being in a chaotic state, their life being in a chaotic state, to being like, I want that more than where I am now, that I'm willing to put up with the pain to get to that. Sometimes that looks like getting the children back from CPS, um, restoring their relationship, holding their marriage together, being shamed within themselves that they're just done with it. It may be a career or a degree or a relationship with God. So, whatever that is, to be able to find that sun in the horizon that is just so bright, so unmistakable, so constant. You know when it's going to show up. Once it shows up, despite what storm goes through, despite the darkest of nights, it is the light that comes up and recharges them to keep them moving forward. That has helped me next go into and develop what I call the transcendent philosophy. And that purpose, that sun in the horizon, is actually a philosophy I use and talk about immensely in a lot of my other platforms as well.
See. How would you define addiction?
I think I would define addiction the way that American Society of Addiction Medicine describes it, which is, this is a chronic disease. I'm paraphrasing. The body changes, the mind changes, the chemicals come, and they basically disrupt your body's natural chemical balance. And what happens after that? Now I'm injecting my own perceptions and appreciation of sciences is that your body changes, disables a lot of its regular mechanisms to create that safety buffer to allow for staying alive when you have all these chemicals coming into your body that don't happen naturally or don't happen in such a concentration in a natural way. For example, opioids. We all have biological opioids like endorphins and enkephalins that go and release dopamine. And these dopamine are also artificially released by introducing heroin, methamphetamine, fentanyl, etc., right? So that surge can cause us to die by not breathing or being checked out and not being responsive. So when you have this amount of artificial chemicals coming in, your body disables its regular mechanisms to make space for that safety. So when these chemicals are gone, your body's left in this chemical gap. And our body needs that range. It has a normal range, and if it falls outside of it, it struggles to function normally. And that's when you get these alarms from the body in the way of withdrawal symptoms, sweating, getting the runs, diarrhea, throwing up, restlessness. All these are your body's signals to you, telling you that it's struggling, it's not in a safe space. You need to get it to safety. And that's when the cravings start to hit and people become very driven to use again to stabilize their body. So that is how addiction comes in and develops. Where it becomes a disease is if you do it long enough, these become almost permanent or the new baseline, right? And so it starts to look like a chronic condition, and people will do anything. That means disrupting their own lives, missing important times, responsibilities, deadlines to go and use. And that out of control is where the disease takes over and it becomes the disease of addiction, not just misuse.
I see. Why do you think that some people develop addictions while it seems others don't, even under certain circumstances or similar circumstances? Yeah,
Yeah, great question. So genetics has a very big role in it. They actually did some twin studies, where it showed that twins that had the genes for addiction versus twins that didn't have genes for addiction, they took them, and when they were, nobody took them, but when they grew up in environments where there was drugs and where there wasn't drugs. So the environment exposure existed in one setting and the other setting it didn't. And they put one of each set of the twins on each side and they followed them. And when they found out later is that twins who had the genetic markers for certain addiction. They developed addiction even when there was no drugs in the environment, and they needed to use only a few times and they would get hooked. Versus the twin that didn't have the gene grew up in a drug filled environment. They may have used a few times, but then they didn't get hooked. They moved on. And then sometimes folks have other genes that can be a repulsion. For example, you may have heard of the Asian flush syndrome, right? When East Asian ethnic individuals, sometimes when they drink alcohol, they don't have the enzyme that can speed up the metabolism of alcohol in their body, or they may have it the other way, where they have the enzyme that builds up the toxic part of the alcohol more. So they just need to drink a little, and then they'll get flushed, and they'll have the effect. So that can be a deterrent in itself for not drinking. So genetics plays about 60% of role in developing addiction. Other than that, there's also the mind over matter, discipline, social aspects. I mean, the American culture is so heavy with um, suggestions to drink, to smoke, to use substances. If you sit and watch, common time entertainment activities like the Super Bowl, there will be beer ads everywhere. I don't know how patients who are trying to recover are dealing with those games. It has been infused into the social definition of having fun, is to use some sort of mind-altering substance to enjoy your environment. So that would be other reasons why people have an easier time falling in. And prevention comes with education and awareness of that the impacts of these substances, how to say no. So having the presence of those educational access points is also an important part of, not even getting started, especially those who have the genetic predisposition.
I see. So touching on that, how closely connected do you think are like trauma and addiction?
Very, extremely,
Yeah.
extremely. Trauma changes our brain in a different way. The person who has unresolved trauma, their brain gets stuck in this survival mechanism. And it's constantly in this fight or flight situation. And a lot of times in my patients who live on the streets, they'll use methamphetamine to stay alert so they don't get attacked on the streets. So they don't even get enough sleep. And then if you add to it history of, rape as a child, growing up in environment with domestic violence, um, and modern counseling, mental health care is very modern. A lot of the individuals who are heavily using, they're from 2 to 3 generations ago, at least 2 generations ago, right? And at that time, the way to cope with emotional trauma, environmental trauma, mental health, that didn't exist. So it compounded. And oftentimes, the easiest way to cope with these are to basically uh, quickly pop a pill or drown a drink and just tune it out, right?
Yeah,
So oftentimes that's where it starts. But thankfully, with the advent and um, further discussion and normalization of mental health and trauma discussions, I think we are able to help more people now than we did even when I started with this stuff, this work.
I see. Let's see. Let's see. How do you think someone can kind of begin healing the underlying trauma instead of kind of just simply managing symptoms or being stuck in cycle of addiction?
Yeah. That's a deep question. I think the first part of any treatment starts with awareness, is the realization that you have this problem that needs to be addressed, that it is what's causing other harmful self-harm activities. And then I think another thing that's really difficult with the individual suffering from trauma is to be kind to themselves. There is so much anger, frustration that they inherit from the perpetrators from outside, and they turn it in on themselves instead of being an ally, compassionate to themselves, that instead of believing that it is okay for them to go and get the help to heal, that they're stronger now and they're in control now, versus in the past, like when they were a child, when they were going through trauma, they may not have had any ability to stand up for themselves. I think a lot of guilt comes from that, from not being able to protect themselves in those moments when their autonomy, their dignity was taken from them. So, there's a lot of work that needs to happen, but it's important to find that right person or group of providers and carers who can help them overcome and move on from that injury and understand by developing plans on how to cope around it, and then also building the community of support around them. So many steps that can be taken, but it is doable.
I see, I see. So our time is kind of coming close to an end, but I wanted to kind of wrap it up with something is if someone was listening today and feels trapped, whether by addiction or burnout or chronic illness, or I don't know, maybe just feeling lost, what do you think they want to hear? What would you like to tell them?
I would like to tell them that, listen to that nudge from within. I think over time we lose touch with our inner self, the purest version of ourselves as we grow up and we learn how to um, blend in to the society and play nice with each other. We learn to, ignore a lot of our natural instincts and inclinations, like, like a baby. A baby will just, if they have the urge to have a bowel movement, they'll just do it, regardless of
Yeah,
what situation and position they're in. And we definitely don't want to do that because that's what makes us adults, right? So that is one good thing on having that increased self-regulation. But we sometimes also lose touch, most of us, most of the time, we lose touch of that core version of ourself that speaks to us of our actual needs. And I think the next level of evolution comes when you can take this higher executive decision making skill to also make space for that inner version of you to shine through. So if that inner version of you is telling you that you're not doing okay, learning to trust that and then to go and take the actions that are required to put everything back into place is something very important that the individuals you mentioned should be doing.
so that's awesome answer. Anyways, I want to thank you for coming on my podcast, and definitely in the future, likely have you on as well too to discuss kind of addiction, but also some other topics as well too. Yeah,
I'll be happy to come and talk again. Thank you so much for having on the show, Jared.
you're welcome.